So now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce today's first speaker, Liza Woolworth, Vice President with Ipsos's Qualitative Research Practice. Liza, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ellen. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. I'm Liza Woolworth, a consumer anthropologist, filmmaker, and founder of Ipsos's U.S. Ethnography Center of Excellence. And I'm really excited to share with you today some results from a recent initiative that Jesse, Sarah, and I did with friends in Ipsos's Public Affairs Division. And as some of you may know, we have a lot of quant and qual that we've all collaborated on over the past 2 years, tracking the impacts of COVID. And this has been the Ethnography Center of Excellence, the Behavioral Science Center, and Public Affairs together. And about 2 months ago, we were talking about the upcoming 2-year anniversary of lockdown in the US. And like Ipsos's data was indicating, we ourselves were feeling a little fatigued, burnt out, stuck, and decided to what could we do to figure out how we could even help ourselves on an individual level make year 3 better? How might we start to heal in terms of all that we've been through? So what we're going to do today is Jesse and I are going to take you through what we have here at Ipsos in terms of the quant and ethnographic qual in terms of the past 2 years. Then we're going to look at the literature and what behavioral science shows as proven ways of improving one's well-being. And then, of course, as the final little piece, we are going to turn to our America in Flux respondents to test out a few things that we thought might help us all improve our moods and our outlooks moving forwards. So that's today's journey. And let's start by taking a step back to 2 years ago and all that we've been through in terms of this COVID experience. And we've all been through a number of different losses in terms of how the past 2 years have hit us individually, collectively. We have first and foremost lost people. We've lost colleagues, friends, family. We have lost senior year of high school or freshman year of college. There have been in-person holidays, in-person school. We've had a number of different things, just even from the headlines here, that we've collectively encountered in terms of not just the masks, the testing, the vaccine, but the civil unrest, the deepening and sort of intractable nature, seemingly, of the political polarization that has happened. There's been climate change. This media headline sort of collage here really takes us through all that has happened with, most recently, of course, in addition to the armed conflicts that have been ongoing on other continents, now we have war in Europe. So whether it's been something directly tied to COVID, something indirect, or something that we have encountered through the lens of COVID, like climate change, like the civil unrest, you'll see a little bit later how things have impacted our American in Flux folks in terms of that indirectness or directness of COVID. We've all collectively and individually been through a lot. And we're going to first look at some of the quant in terms of how people have been coping and how it has impacted how they're looking to the future. And then we'll also look at things in terms of America in Flux and what this has looked like for them from a more ethnographic viewpoint. So I'm going to turn now to Jesse so that he can detail how folks have coped over the past 2 years.
Awesome. Thank you, Liza. And, I think we all very much resonate with those headlines and have certainly experienced that roller coaster on a personal and subjective level. This is also something that we've been tracking as well here at Ipsos. And what you see on this graph are the results of our Ipsos Pandemic Adaptation Continuum. And this measure was really built out of a number of different sources, both scientific, medical, as well as from public policy organizations, including things like the Kubler-Ross scale of grief, thinking about the World Health Organization pandemic stages. And we've collapsed that measure down here into those two dimensions that Liza was mentioning. You know, what is the sentiment that things are getting better? And how do we feel as though we're just coping? And, you know, if nothing else, this shows you the massive reversals in kind of how feelings are within the United States over time. You know, we all had that moment in February and March, you know, after we're getting kind of vaccinated and all of that kind of excitement there about, you know, we're going to be able to start doing things again, and then really starting to see things, you know, deteriorate with the Delta variant proving once again, and now not only with Omicron, but with the threat of other variants on the horizon and certainly disruption abroad. You know, we see that starting to collapse again. And so this really, you know, describes those ups and downs in a quantitative way. And this next slide also, I think, is so illustrative in how we all feel right now. You know, one of the things that we're all dealing with is, when will this be over? And I think just that bar on the left, when you look at how people felt earlier this February versus last February, there's a massive difference, right? We have about, you know, 5% more people, you know, almost half of America feels it's never going to be better, or it's never going to be the same, or it's going to be at least a year until that's the case. So there's a lot of kind of anxiety in how we're going on, and this decrease in optimism keeps coming, you know, that decrease in confidence keeps coming. And so all of this has really fed into our cumulative view that this might not end over a year. So this is just some quantitative data that's illustrative of, I think, how we've all been feeling. But we also have some incredible stories as well. And Liza, maybe you want to tell us a little bit more about how these perspectives have been represented in our ethnographic work.
Great, thank you, Jesse. So there's a little delay here. So also 2 years ago, we launched America in Flux, which is a longitudinal digital ethnography project where we identified 5 states that we thought would give us some regional variety in terms of how people, communities, states, regions were handling the massive disruption that COVID was at that time, and, you know, would allow us to track how things played out, however long, you know, this all continued. And so within those 5 states, we chose 25 households, which have a variety of different ages, life stage, generations, household makeup, racial and ethnic backgrounds. We really wanted to make sure that we were able to virtually and somewhat figuratively embed with a number of different perspectives and experiences. Initially, we thought it might not be a hugely long study, but here we are 2 years later, and it continues. And as part of that, like the civil unrest that I made a nod to before, the aperture of the study quickly grew. We had initially conceived of this, you know, it was COVID-19. How can we study this as an anthropologist? You know, all in real time, we need to be paying attention to the impact on beliefs and behaviors. And that expanded to civil unrest and then the political and cultural divisions within the country. And so those 3 things intersecting meant that there was a whole lot of flux, and we were able to see all of the different changes, improvements, steps forward, steps back over the course of a year. And, you know, when we last had a webinar that drew from America in Flux, we were able to highlight, you know, experiences such as Brandis from Atlanta and Jaron. He's actually just north of Portland, but in Washington State. And after a year, they were incredibly tired. Brandis was here at the hospital late at night, while early in lockdown, with her son home. School had just basically shut down. They were making cookies. Just a couple weeks later, it was Panda Express. And so while that was June, come January, the numbers were up in terms of COVID cases at the hospital, and she was really, really tired. Meanwhile, Jaron he's been working as a financial advisor. He's an independent consultant, and he used to travel a lot to meet with his clients, but all of a sudden he's at home. His 2 children are at home. His wife is at home, and everyone was just worn out. It was very volatile. You'll see a little bit later in terms of his, family situation, and it was a year ago taking a toll. So the beauty of this project is that we've been able to continue to be in touch with these respondents and hear from them, learn from them, and now a year later, things aren't much better for Brandis or for Jaron. Brandis, things are a little bit lighter in terms of the COVID numbers at the hospital, but it's still very, very busy, and staffing has been very problematic. She's just found out the landlord wants to move back into the house, so she and her son, who is about to graduate from 8th grade, Kendrick, they now need to figure out how to move. And while the need to move is not something tied directly to COVID, the fact that the housing market is just off the charts and she may not be able to swing a mortgage to stay in a house and instead move to a different school district, move to an apartment, that is COVID related. Meanwhile, Jaron, the roller coaster has continued. Mental health over the course of the past year became a larger issue for his family. All three of the other family members are in therapy at this point. And I'm about to show a video where you'll see a little bit more from him about what this roller coaster has been like. So rather than me talking about it, let's move to contextualizing the past 2 years in terms of individual and household stories from our America and Flux respondents. This will be a subset of folks, but a bunch of different life stages and different impacts and ways of coping in terms of what the past 2 years has meant for these individuals. So if you bear with me, I'll take us over to our first video.
Our university recommended everyone going online. Everything just happened so fast. It was really kind of insane. During our spring break, I think I hit pretty much my low there. No energy, no motivation, just procrastinating. I remember distinctly there was a lady in the back who was praying really loudly, really intensely. And even though I'm not a religious person, that really struck a note about how scary a situation like that would have been. We have a small business, so I think my parents said during lockdown, revenue is about 60 to 80%. There's just been so much uncertainty in the world, so it's kind of hard to know what to do, what to plan for. It's kind of wild that it's been over a year since we've had this pandemic. I personally haven't done too much about AIP Heritage Month, but now I think because this is also something I have to do a lot for my boss, and as she's a prominent kind of Korean American woman, being surrounded by that all the time is a little bit exhausting. So I'm still currently living at home, but these are all actually from Paris, where I went recently. I'm able to save a lot and kind of look out for my future a little bit more for trips, for just kind of luxuries that I probably couldn't have if I wasn't living at home. COVID is here, it's going to stay. Nothing will ever get rid of it for certain, and it's kind of just seeing and acting in the moment versus kind of planning ahead.
Through this COVID thing, I've noticed a decrease in ability to feel really happy. It is just a long time with COVID and adding to so much unrest.
What do we want? Justice! When do we want it?
Health-wise, I'm doing okay. Emotionally, I can tell I'm very different. I really can't sleep anymore. I just had a friend lost 3 people to COVID within a matter of 2 days. A husband and wife, and then a good friend. I don't see a lot of bright light, but yet when I go out now, masks are few and far between.
I know a lot of people who just don't think this is real. Even my own family members go back and forth as to whether this is serious or not. We're trying to just live life and as normal as possible, but we've got this, we've got smoke from the fires, it's just crazy. We need a redo on 2020. Do you feel like you learn as much when it's online teaching?
Not very.
Even though your mom's doing a ton to help you?
Mm-hmm.
Does it feel like a lot, Roz?
Yeah.
Yeah. Rosalind's really tired of having to help. I just told her we should just have him not do some of his special needs stuff. I find myself being a little less patient than I used to be. And yeah, it's tough. All of it's tough. We have gotten help from various doctors for various family members. Our oldest is really happy at Portland State with the music program there. School's going well for the most part for both the kids. I think our youngest has had difficulty talking to people. He kind of disengaged quite a bit. And so we've been trying to get him some extra help so that he'll talk with people more.
I have a small business, and that really got impacted because all my plans for the business were based on the consistency of things, that the world is going to stay consistent, but really any small thing creates this huge ripple effect, so you have to prepare for all of that.
I'm hoping to be in a much warmer state like Florida, and I'm going to try it out this year, and then just thinking about how to move my business there.
What ended up happening in May was I met a girl moved into my house. She sublet a room in the house for a month, and she was in Chicago and I still lived in Brooklyn. And at some point, the long distance thing just became really annoying. So that's where I am right now. I don't have a cookie business anymore. I ended up posting the recipe because I don't think I'm going to revive it. It's just not in the cards at the moment. And I got a job at QuickBooks, the actual company. I was so grateful that the government gave me all this unemployment money and food stamps and Medicaid and everything. So I just felt like I was supported.
I did some online dating during COVID. That was weird. It was a lot of texting and FaceTiming and not really meeting people in person. I've definitely grown closer, I think, to my children because we've spent a lot of time together. We've been real honest with each other. I got divorced last year, at the beginning of COVID, and then I am now married. 2 of my children are in counseling now. They're receiving services because one is very, very angry all the time and one is just very depressed all the time. So that concerns me. I mean, they definitely feel stressed. Gavin is no longer receiving any counseling. He kind of decided that he didn't need it. Tommy Jr.'s in football, Gavin's in wrestling, so they get to do workouts. They love that. And then Karina got a gym membership. Everyone does their chores. Everyone's been working on picking up after themselves, helping me out. Because I feel like during COVID I did a lot more because I was home so much. And now, I'm at work in person.
Obviously there's ups and downs. There's been moments of anger, lots of disappointment just around the people around me, people I grew up with, and how their lack of taking things seriously has been. Frustration around the lack of a strong plan nationally. Stores are opening back up. Things feel like they're going back to normal. Got construction right out in front of our house, roads being fixed, but it's not there yet. It's not there yet, and that I think that does cause a little bit of stress. My hope is that things get back to a better normal. I just hope that we can get back to a place where decisions don't have to have plan Bs, and there doesn't have to be a large number of contingencies put into place. What if this happens? What if that happens? That we can just kind of go about it and do what we want and feel comfortable. I think comfort's probably the biggest thing.
All right, so can you see that? Did it work, Jesse? All right. Well, there was a lot that happened to folks. We tried to include some some positive outcomes, but losing your company, losing senior year in person, all of the mental health challenges that Noah and the rest of Jaren's family have been undergoing, and then Terry no longer working as a nurse. A number of examples of how what a long, heavy road it's been for the folks. So how about we see how science might give us a path forward, Jesse?
No, it's sad. And I mean, we've gotten to know these people so well over the past 2 years that we've heard their stories and been in their homes with them as they've experienced this. And, the one thing that really comes through to me from listening there is just the pain in their voices. And, as we were thinking about kind of where we've been, we've all experienced those losses. We've all had that pain to various degrees and different levels of personal nature. But how do we move forward from that, right? I think, what we're all looking for now is how do we heal as individuals and how do we heal as a society as well? And so, we're very lucky that there are some answers there. And not only has science given us, wonderful things like the vaccine, but also can potentially help us get, some answers towards this as well. So I think it's useful always just to kind of provide that context of where we're coming from. So we're providing a behavioral science perspective on this. And we typically think of behavioral science here in two ways. It's really what are those hidden and non-conscious factors that are driving our decisions? And then, how can we leverage those factors in order to create attitudinal and behavioral change? And so we're very interdisciplinary. We tend to look at anybody who has a say about decision making. So even on this study, we've incorporated elements from cognitive psychology, which is really about how we process information. What do we pay attention to? What do we remember? What are those different associations that we have mentally? We also bring in social psychology. How have our own identities been affected? What are the things that we've been doing to connect with others and with ourselves? Behavioral economics, this is probably what most of us have seen in the airport. Books like Blink or Nudge or Predictably Irrational, all around how we can shape the environment around us in order to make certain outcomes more or less likely. And then finally, cultural anthropology. And this is where we've been so lucky to be able to partner with Liza and her team, because at the end of the day, our decisions have meaning, and those meanings aren't completely individually driven, right? A lot of that is around our culture and the society that we're in. So the reason why, we've brought this to light here, I think is illustrated well on the next slide. And this is always a good place to insert a little bit of levity into the situation. And, this gives us a quick laugh, right? They're taking the escalator up to the gym. And what is so nice about this from a behavioral science perspective is it shows us that our intentions aren't always enough, right? That there's more to the story there. Clearly, there was an intention here for these people to go work out and have a wonderful and sweaty time at the gym. But upon first sight of seeing those escalators, they jump on them, right? And so here, it's not that they're being stupid. It's not that they're being kind of, not thoughtful about what they're doing, but it's truly reflective of that non-conscious influence. And as a useful primer, on the next slide, we kind of have broken this down into one of the most rudimentary and fundamental frameworks within behavioral science, which is this concept of system one and system two. And, it's not that one system works and one doesn't, this is a continuum between them, but it sort of explains when and where our non-conscious mind tends to dominate our decisions and when our conscious mind tends to dominate our decisions. And so system one, this is our kind of non-conscious mind. It was very much trained to make it easier for us to think about the things that were most pressing. It sort of offloaded a lot of that information processing into kind of something automatic. And so it's really fast. It captures a lot of information all at once. But in order to match those patterns effectively, it has some shortcuts that it takes. And so even though it's very high bandwidth, it often leads to those behaviors that might be different than what we intend. On the other side of this continuum is system two, and this is what we think of as kind of our conscious mind. It's slow, it's deliberate, we can control it, and it's very much, thought to have developed as a way for us to operate within society, right? How do we plan for the future? How do I think beyond the current moment? How do I communicate with others and convince them that my plan might be the best way to move forward? So both of these kind of two systems work together. And some of the ideas on how to move forward really lean into kind of that combination of system one and system two activity in order to help us feel better. And we've broken this down into kind of three key components. And across all of those different areas of decision making that I shared earlier, these three always bubble to the surface of what actually controls our decisions and our behaviors. And they're relatively simple at the end of the day. The first are our goals. What do we want and how much do we want it? The second are our beliefs. What do we know? What do we think? What do we feel? What kind of knowledge do we have? What are our attitudes? And then all of this is really determined by the various contexts that we're in, right? How I feel at work and my goals there and what I think about might be very, very different than when I'm on a ski vacation with my two younger daughters, right? And there's going to be a lot different kind of beliefs and goals that occur within that context. So using this framework, Sarah and I had the opportunity to go through the academic literature and really start to look at what we could do as individuals to move forward. And there's actually quite a few of these more that we won't discuss today, but the four that we've really centered on, thinking about what we can all do that might actually be relatively easy for us to do. The first is kind of thinking about spending some time in nature. What are the effects of that? How might that help us feel better in certain ways? Sarah will talk about kind of that unique experience of breaking bread with our loved ones, whether they be our friends or our family, and some of the restorative effects that brings to our lives. I'll jump back in and talk about, some of those hobbies. Like my house is a sourdough house, and that's definitely a Saturday morning activity for all of us. But all of those hobbies and interests that we've cultivated and developed over the last couple of years, how might those have helped us cope in different ways? And then finally, Sarah will conclude with, helping others. How do we create that upward spiral of our emotions by, taking care of others and really showing, that gratitude in order to not only make others feel better, but also ourselves. So I'll start off by talking a little bit around noticing nature. And this is really, really some fascinating work that's been done over the past decade or so. And really at the end of the day, it says, really communing with nature is restorative for us. It connects us to our evolutionary past. They call it sort of innate biophilia. We have this love of nature even from a young age. And as we've kind of urbanized ourselves into homes and permanent shelters with electricity and running water and all of that good stuff, there might be that goal that's not being fulfilled of actually being in nature and experiencing things firsthand. The second is our escape. It not only takes us out of our current mindset, but it also removes all of those different cues that might have been stressors for us, whether it is the online learning or the bills that are paying up or the cost of a dozen eggs as I go into the grocery store due to inflation. But it also provides something else, and that's a kind of constant and changing level of stimuli for us to pay attention to. So there's almost some distractions there, as we're within nature. And then finally, nature itself is physically calming. And this has really been built up with all of the associations that we've had over time. And, you can think of them yourself. When you want to relax, maybe you turn on that white noise machine. And whether it's a sound of a babbling brook, the rustling of the wheat field in the wind, or even a rainstorm outside, these are all things that we mentally and non-consciously associate with feelings of calm and nature itself. So On the next slide, you can really kind of see how this plays out. So this was tested in the lab. There was a 2-week intervention, and they kind of had 3 different groups. They had one group say, I want you to be very mindful of nature and go out and do stuff. The other one was a little bit more man-made. We want you to focus on some things that you love, maybe some man-made objects or environments that you could try to connect with. And then the third group had no intervention whatsoever. And you can see here they were measuring positive affect. How good did you feel? And what they found was, very, very clear that that connection with nature had a significantly greater effect on people's well-being than interacting with toys or man-made environments or just doing nothing at all. So again, a really interesting way that we can possibly improve going forward. And I'll hand it over to you, Sarah, to talk a little bit more about what we can do with our friends and family.
Thanks. Yeah, we'll start with the big broad picture too. So, eating together is a human universal. It's actually even across history and time, right? We could say that hunting and gathering has always been a communal activity. And so naturally, it's a way for us to grow closer in our relationships, build trust, engage with others, and feel like we are part of a community, so build that social support. A really cool set of findings finds that when we're enjoying food, we actually literally physically enjoy it more when it's shared with others as well. So they hooked people up to fMRI machines and found that when you are sharing a meal with others, the reward center of your brains actually have higher activation levels or light up more, right, when you're sharing that food versus eating alone. And we can't talk about food in the pandemic without talking about families and home cooked meals. And so sort of 2 different pieces of information here. About 50% of families say they have increased their number of home cooked meals. And importantly, when those meals are shared, everyone sort of sits down at the table together. What they find is that this increases everyone's score on family functioning. So like family dynamics are better. It also strengthens your relationship with your partner, and each individual within the family benefits from self-esteem. On the next slide, we'll look at how this goes into the field and how it's been looked at. So the first set is a qualitative study where they actually had people keep food diaries, essentially, where they talked about the meals that they had, what were the experiences around the food and the meals, how were they prepared, and who were they shared with, most importantly. And then they had follow-up in-depth interviews. And one of the largest themes that they saw in those diaries and in those interviews was that when you were able to share that experience with someone you cared about, and they did have ones where it was just a good friend, it didn't have to be a family member or a relative directly, that you had enhanced feelings of well-being, that it elevated the experience overall by being able to cook, prepare a meal, and then share it with someone else. Below, you're seeing a more experimental approach. So here they brought people into a lab and they exposed them to imagery that was related to eating alone or eating together. So you can imagine like going to a restaurant and you each order separate meals, right? And you share a meal that way, or literal sharing of food. So like family style, you all order the big Italian plate of spaghetti and serve yourselves off of it. And what they found was that eating together and sharing food both led to increased sense of pleasurability in that imagery versus the eating alone. So this seems to be a really powerful thing that's been ingrained in us for a long time, and something really easy we can do to help, again, elevate the experience of something we're already going to do, which is to eat, right?
It's really interesting, when you look at that, and because, we've all done that. And the other thing we've all done as well is kind of think about what our own interests are. And there's been a lot of work within the academic sciences around the ways in which our hobbies can actually help us feel better. So, it's been shown within the medical community that, these hobbies help really stave off some of the depressive symptoms and depressive thinking that sufferers have when they're experiencing depression. That engagement as well has had physiological benefits, literally lowering the amount of cortisol or stress hormones in our blood and also decreasing our blood pressure, and then kind of laddering up to just feelings of life satisfaction and life engagement. And, we know why this works from behavioral science. Rituals really provide us with that sense of certainty moving forward and that comfort in doing something a little bit more familiar. You know, rituals create a sense of escape from those stressors that we might currently have had before and give us that flow state where we're able to match our mastery over the hobby with the continuing challenges that it provides for us. And then finally, it gives us a way to achieve, right? This is just something that might make us feel good about our own efficacy. This is something that I control, that I can actually make better. And on the next slide, you can see this was a really interesting study that was done where they surveyed, 5,000 people during the pandemic. And they found, very, very clearly that, these hobbies were lowering people's anxiety as well as their depressive symptoms moving forward. So yet another way that we can continue to move forward. I'll hand it back over to Sarah, who can really talk about, where that charity gets us.
Yeah, the last one we're going to focus on is helping others to help yourself, actually. So put really simply, we feel good. We get warm, fuzzy feelings, right, when we're able to help others. The other thing that it does, though, when we're in a pandemic and we feel uncertain and like we don't have control, is that taking care of someone else is a way for us to affirm our sense of autonomy, or that we do have control and competence and our ability to be able to do that. Lastly, again, we are naturally social beings. We need to feel connection. Everyone does, at least to a certain extent. And so taking care of others is a way for us to affirm our social selves, increase our sense of relatedness and social capital and our social connection. And this one they took out of the lab actually to the real world, we can say, and they passed out Starbucks gift cards. Specifically, they had instructions on how you should spend your gift card. So there are 4 conditions here. The first one, they had you go to Starbucks alone, spend it on yourself. That's the blue bar. The next one, they had you go to Starbucks with someone else, but only use the gift card on yourself. The third one, or the orange bar, is a low connection. So you are giving the gift card to someone, but not going with them to Starbucks. You can think of this as the pay it forward or random act of kindness type of a thing they were trying to get at. And then lastly was take someone else to Starbucks and pay for their coffee or their drink and your own. And what they found was they followed up sort of right away, same day, on people's overall happiness, was that last condition where you are able to share a moment with someone else and take care of them had the most positive effect on your overall happiness.
These give you a sense of, some of the things that the laboratory has shown. And, science is messy. And what really matters at the end of the day, as we spoke about earlier, is that context that people are in. So we were able to partner with our public affairs team, and using their award-winning knowledge panel group, we were able to test this out around kind of the American public. And what you can see here is how reported behaviors, if people did these or not, actually led to their current state of well-being. And you can see across the board, these led to significant increases in their perceptions of happiness going forward. So this was fascinating to all of us. And, not only did Liza, Sarah, and myself absolutely start doing these a little bit more as soon as we got the data, but we wanted to see how impactful this was for all of the individuals that we'd been tracking and speaking with across the pandemic. So Liza, I'll turn it back over to you, and would love to hear more about how our folks kind of experience these things together.
Awesome. Yeah, so this was really exciting to be able to leverage what we've been doing for 2 years in terms of both quant and qual, and in terms of translating what came out of the knowledge panel and applying it to what we already knew about the respondents in America and Flux. I went from 4 buckets to 5 different things that we would ask the respondents to do. We usually gave them 3 choices. They could have, their choice of those 3 and do it for 3 times over the course of a week. So eating with friends and family, we asked that there be no devices at the table. We, of course, went with spending time outside in nature. As you can see from the photo in the back, Jaron, an avid cyclist, he found additional rewards from having alone time in addition to exercise earlier in the pandemic. So, perhaps this was something that he might try to dial up in terms of what he's doing these days. Or maybe he would pick up, restart, or increase the frequency of a hobby. We also suggested the possibility of starting that meaningful project that you've just been putting off and putting off and putting off. And we also wanted to test out the doing something nice for someone. And it could be a different person each of those 3 times. It could be a different thing each of the 3 times. And we really just sort of suggested a spread of things for folks to choose from, rather than saying, okay, go join a gym or do something, really crazy for us. See what might be within your, repertoire, even if you haven't done it really frequently of late, or you haven't done it in 2 years. What could you bring into your life now and share with us over the course of the week the impact? So with digital ethnography, we ask people to, as you've seen, film themselves and also provide some sort of talking heads about how it's all going. So in this instance, we wanted to see whatever they chose to do in action. We wanted them to give us feedback right after they had completed that action or that activity. And then we wanted them to sum up after the course of the week as to, how it all felt. Was it something that they might continue doing? So my one piece of advice in terms of watching this video is to just track facial expressions, because I think that will help us see where it's working and where perhaps it was not. So let's go to tape. Here we go. Improving our well-being in 2022.
So one of the things I really like to do is our neighbors that live near us. I like to sneak over there the night before trash is supposed to go out and pull their trash can out. I sneak into their backyard and grab their trash bin. So it's always a game of cat and mouse to see if I can sneak in without them knowing that I'm here and get it out there. So that way they're surprised.
I came to the decision that I'm going to declutter and organize and put away all my laundry. I'm going to declutter and organize my table. I am just being real. I'm going to declutter and organize all of my home. And I'm going to put things on Mercari and OfferUp and sell things. That is going to be my feat for this week.
One of the things I've been trying to do, especially this year, is take a lunch walk instead of taking a lunch break. Honestly, especially during the winter time, I would take a nap during my lunch hour. It's kind of nice to just be able to go out, de-stress from whatever I'm working on at the moment. I usually don't take my work phone or any of my work materials with me to just kind of fully relax, listen to a podcast, just kind of decompress from whatever is happening that afternoon.
So we have a friend who used to live near us in Washington and moved to Idaho, not near a Trader Joe's. And his favorite thing to eat, because he's on a keto diet, is this gluten-free crisp bread from Trader Joe's. But we're going to send him a little care package. And this box wasn't big enough, so we have a lot of crisp bread for him that should last him for hopefully quite a long time.
So I really like your suggestions, and I am baking to share with my neighbors.
So my in-laws are big golfers. And so one of the things that we did when they came to Atlanta is have gone together once a week. But it's been something that is a way for us to better understand who her parents are. It's even become a point of, during the week, we'll talk about, when we're going to go next, and are we going to bet on who's going to win, who's going to lose, and who's going to pay for lunch. Kind of binds us together in a way that I think we never thought was going to be possible.
Very pleased with my work for day 2. Getting things accomplished, it makes me feel really great, encouraged. Still have some stuff to do, but man, day 2 has been successful.
So I thought I'd do a nice little bit of service. This one's actually for a family member. My youngest loves peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, so I am making him 3 PBJs. Hey, Noah. Noah, look. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Are you happy about that?
Mm-hmm.
Do you like PBJs?
Yeah.
I'm glad I could make you one of your favorites. Love you.
Love you.
Yo. So good.
Going in that lunch hour has been a really nice improvement. Being able to take that time off is something I've enjoyed and I'll probably continue on. I think it's been a meaningful improvement, especially since I'm trying to get healthier and more fit for the summer. And it just seems like a smart decision to do.
Adding that into my routine, I think is going to be something that I can use to kind of help reset and feel like I'm doing something for myself. And so it's something that I'm very thankful for and have high anticipation that it'll have good mental health benefits for me.
I decided to take this meaningful project to the next level. I found on Craigslist to help a family clean and organize. When the husband, the father saw the kitchen, he was trying to hold back his tears, and I was thinking, this is a meaningful project that I started on my own for myself, for my husband. It's turned into a meaningful project to help another family.
So while we were doing these things, it kind of felt good to take a break from like the everyday hustle, bustle, busyness of one thing to another, and the screen time as well. So it felt like a good, healthy break. It felt good to think like you're giving back, you're communicating with people how you feel, and it was just kind of like a welcome change. So I think we all need to like take time out of our schedule to make a point to do stuff like this.
I don't know. I feel good when I'm doing things for other people, and I think they like it. I like when somebody is thoughtful enough to do something for me, and it makes me feel good. So I think we're all better off if we do something nice for somebody and hope that they get in the spirit of doing something nice for other people.
Yeah, and just it's amazing, right? I mean, as you said, Liza, the looks of mischievousness on Jaren's face, that look on Allison's face as she realizes that her own hobby and passion of organizing at home can bring that same joy to others. And even just like seeing those cookies go in the oven, right, for somebody else, like those are all so powerful. And I think, it's a nice way for us to think about our own lives and those just micro things that we're able to do that aren't that big to do that can just make us feel better. And whether it was the smile on their faces, the smile on those faces they were helping, or even just the optimism that people felt as a result was really transcendent in those videos. So thanks for providing that, Liza. And, I think there are probably some lessons for brands as well, right? And as we move forward as well. So love for you to share those with us.
Yeah, so first of all, I need to incorporate some of these into my life to a greater degree than nothing. Some of these currently are currently there. But, we talked about this a little bit earlier as a team, and then watching the video again, I think this is something that we can individually take on to improve our moods. I think all of the material that was covered by Sarah and Jesse in terms of those benefits being outside or the meals with others. We did have people within our respondent sample who did do the meals. Not everyone had stuck with the meals together. So that was something that we saw people choose. There was collecting trash in the neighborhood. There was a lot that people said improved things for them individually, for their family, for their neighborhood. So I think that's something that all of us can take away and apply to ourselves immediately. I would also say that there is something to be said for sharing this with colleagues, teammates, the organization. This is not necessarily something that has to happen only in a home or outside of home. It could happen in the workplace. It could happen, well, I guess home is the workplace for a lot of us still, but maybe there's a new way of looking at the office or looking at how team time together could be spent, or you could encourage those in your organization to do in terms of work-life balance. And then I think critically is what we all can do in terms of supporting customers, consumers. What can brands, products, and services do to help individuals, help groups of people improve their well-being? REI, I think, is already doing this in terms of the opt-out Black Friday exercise. The stores are closed. They want everybody to go outside. We've seen that being out in nature is an example of something that will improve your mood. So I think for those joining us today for this, we can all ask some questions as to what we could be doing for people, especially as we're starting to look more and more at organizations, businesses, brands as guides and as more actively oriented institutions. How can we start to come together and encourage or enable our consumers to take these steps to improve their moods as we move into year 3 and hopefully learn to improve and cope and heal to a better degree, just because you don't see the uncertainty coming to a quick end in all of this. But I'd love to hear what Sarah and Jesse have to say on this too.
No, I completely agree with you, Sarah, Liza. And it's actually, I was just thinking, like, speaking of questions, there are some great questions that people have been asking. And although we're certainly not going to have time to get to all of them today, please keep asking them in the box. We'll be able to loop back up and answer those, follow up through email of any that we don't get to answer here. But, I think one of the really interesting ones that's here, and Sarah, maybe I'll let you take a first crack at this one, is you've given us a lot of things that we could be doing. Is there anything that we should potentially stop doing, or even other elements that weren't in those 4 that can improve our well-being?
Yeah, I'll start with the negative. We did collect some the quantitative data in the large survey, where we looked at some things that maybe could be working against us in our well-being. And one of the big things that stood out on a number of well-being measures that we ended up collecting was just putting down your smartphone. So the more time that you spent on your smartphone, the less happy you felt, the less meaningful your life was. And I think this is a really thought-provoking one for brands. So, thinking about when you go to Disney, it should be about connecting with your family in the time. But right now, the way they have it set up is you kind of have to use your phone to navigate even just how to go from the one area of the park to the other, but also how to queue yourself up in line and things like that. And there are some brands that are taking initiatives. Lipton actually last month just launched a Tea Talk initiative, which is encouraging especially moms to disconnect and have tea with a friend or a family member and reconnect socially with them, which is one of the other positive activities that we had collected on. So like reconnecting with an old friend or family member, of course, exercise. We already talked about food, but specifically eating healthy actually was another one that we found effects for. Giving to charity, spending time with a religious group, or even just generally any sort of social community that gives you that sense of connection that we're really longing for right now, or some of the other things that we can do.
Yeah, it's fascinating, right? And I think it's such an interesting counterpoint to some more of like the technology assisted experiences that we've seen so many brands and companies develop over the past couple of years. Even today there was an article in the Times about ski resorts getting rid of their paper maps. And so, just thinking about where's the old school, maybe going to give that better experience given some of the things we see here. Liza, there's a great question for you as well. A lot of the things that people did, they did because you asked them to do. How sticky do we think some of those behaviors will be going forward?
Well, I think that's something that we definitely want to follow up on. This obviously is a snapshot. We often saw people sort of default to things that were there before and just sort of dial things up. Chanel was very upfront with us and said, I am only continuing to do these paper word searches as a break, and I'm doing it for you. This is not going to stick. I need it on my phone. I need it to be easier. I've got too much happening right now. But she talked about how she wanted to have less on the plate so that she could get back to reading more frequently, because that was something that she really enjoyed doing before, and she just has not been able to fold it into the mix right now. So I'm hoping that, as this moves forward, we'll check back with people. We'll see if things have continued to be part of their routine. If you make something a habit and it begets rewards, you're more likely to then have that stick. So, longer term, is this something that remains within their lives? Do they expand upon it? Do they inspire others around them? This is all something that I would love for us to revisit, because, a week is great, but it's a week. It's like that gym membership in January.
Yeah, no, it's a great answer. And certainly that's one of the things we'll be looking at long term, right? Not only how sticky are these behaviors over time, but do they continue to deliver those rewards in the same way that they have before, right? So much in the same way that we can imagine, going to Topgolf with our in-laws and our partner is going to be enjoyable for us. How might the same thing be true for making that family meal once a week, or taking the time to do something for your neighbors? Based on Jaron's expression, I think that's something he's going to keep doing, but definitely worth checking up on as we go forward. And I think, just to reinforce some of the points you brought up earlier, Liza, that question about what can we do with this? And I love the idea of this is also related to our work, right? So I think, like, as you talk to, your HR function within your company, like, what are the group things that we can do together as things become safer? Where are those opportunities to break bread with one another? Where do we encourage, like, employee groups around certain hobbies or interests that people have, whether it's listening to a Grateful Dead show on archive.org or having that knitting circle or reading club for those of us that are more kind of active in those areas. So a lot of really, really great ideas here. Lots of remaining questions. Thank you so much, everybody, for asking those great questions. We'll definitely get back to you with some answers here. But on behalf of Liza and Sarah and myself, just wanted to thank all of you for your escape today and hanging out with us. It's been our pleasure to help you help yourselves. We've all definitely felt a little bit better as we've been doing it. And thank you again for your time and joining us. And we'll be in touch with you soon.
Thank you.